Los Angeles is facing an economic reckoning, and it's not what you might expect. While the nation debates immigration policy, the City of Angels is watching its economy crumble in real time. The culprit? A controversial immigration raid that has sent shockwaves through the region's workforce and raised serious questions about the true cost of aggressive immigration enforcement. When federal agents jumped out of a rented Penske truck at a Los Angeles Home Depot on August 6th, they weren't just making arrests, they were triggering an economic domino effect that's now threatening the foundation of one of America's most vital metropolitan economies.
Depot near MacArthur Park on Wednesday. More than a dozen people were detained outside the store on Wilshire Boulevard in the Westlake area in an operation they called Trojan Horse, according to the Department of Homeland Security. They went on to say, quote, Border Patrol conducted a targeted raid that resulted in the arrest of 16 illegal aliens from Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Video from News Chopper 4 also showed a Penske moving truck at the operation. Penske Trucking Company later released a statement saying in part it strictly prohibits the transportation of people in the cargo area of its vehicles, and they were not made aware that its trucks would be used and did not authorize this.
The operation, which saw masked agents in tactical gear emerge from the back of a moving truck like something out of an action movie, resulted in the detention of 16 undocumented immigrants from Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and Nicaragua.
It was called Operation Trojan Horse. On Wednesday, a man in a Penske truck pulled up to a Home Depot in Westlake, California. Day laborers hang out there. He was offering work. As they gathered near the truck, several Border Patrol agents jumped out. The workers scattered. 16 were arrested. Many city leaders from Mayor Karen Bass on down, as well as advocates for immigrants, were indignant. They thought such sweeps had ended due to a July 11 temporary restraining order from the U.S. District Court. It banned indiscriminate immigration stops and arrests on Fourth Amendment grounds. The order had been upheld earlier this week by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Local authorities were wondering what legal steps to take next, but as far as the feds were concerned, the raid was successful. They were enforcing federal law and would continue to do so. Not that they didn't care about the TRO. On Thursday, the Trump White House petitioned the Supreme Court, asking them to lift the ban on roving patrols. And before I forget to mention this, Penske Truck Rental made clear that they did not authorize their vehicle to be used in such a way. It looks like the Trump administration is involved in yet another legal standoff. Joining us now is Gregory Bovino, Chief Patrol Agent El Centro Sector at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Chief, thank you for being here.
The dramatic footage captured that day shows Border Patrol agents conducting what they called a targeted enforcement effort, with witnesses describing people running in fear as 6 SUVs with armed federal agents arrived at the scene. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. The E-raid itself might be the least significant part of what's happening in Los Angeles. The real story is how immigration enforcement has essentially broken the city's economic engine. And the data proves it. To understand the magnitude of what we're witnessing, we need to look at the numbers. California experienced a devastating 3.1% drop in private sector employment during the week immediately following the Trump administration's escalated immigration raids in the state. That's not a typo. 3.1% in a single week. To put this in perspective, UC Merced researchers say this employment collapse is second only to the unemployment surge California experienced during the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. But the scale becomes even more staggering when you break down the raw numbers. The percentage decline translates to approximately 465,000 fewer Californians reporting they worked during the week of escalated immigration enforcement. Of those, an estimated 271,541 were U.S. citizens and 193,428 were non-citizens. Yes, you heard that correctly. More American citizens stopped working than non-citizens. This reveals something crucial that immigration hawks don't want to acknowledge. The American economy isn't neatly divided between citizen and non-citizen workers. It's an interconnected web where the removal or fear-driven absence of immigrant workers cascades through entire industries, affecting everyone. Consider what happened in Los Angeles after these raids and similar operations. Business owners in heavily Latino areas report foot traffic slower than during COVID-19 lockdowns.
Manuel Florido is working this site in Ontario. Although he's documented, he says many of his co-workers are not. He says they're not showing up to work. Across the street and 2 stories up, this worker says they have a fifth of the people on this job as they usually do. He admits he's scared of recent raids. But he goes on to say he is more afraid of not being able to support his family.
Any small disruption in the labor markets could be very impactful to construction in California.
Tim Kawahara is the executive director of the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate. He says California has the highest percentage of immigrant construction workers in the nation.
In California, 41% of construction workers are immigrants. Undoubtedly, some of those workers are undocumented.
He says Los Angeles is already facing a labor shortage in an industry faced with rebuilding 16,000 structures that burned during the recent fires. So any loss of workers will hurt.
We have a shortage of labor, and there could be some supply chain disruptions and cost of building materials going up with tariffs. So it's really a double whammy.
Streets in Latino communities have emptied. Metro ridership in Los Angeles, which is disproportionately used by immigrant communities, has fallen to its lowest levels of the year. Construction workers across the city are now describing a workforce that has shrunk to just a fifth of normal staffing levels. Workers openly admit they're scared to show up for work, but they're even more afraid of not being able to support their families. The fear has become so pervasive that it's reshaping entire industries overnight. KB Ruwala, CEO of Perfumes Los Angeles in downtown Santee Alley, captured the devastation perfectly. We have probably 20% of the business that we normally would have. The economic logic behind this collapse is both simple and profound. When non-citizen workers don't show up for work, it doesn't create opportunities for citizen workers. It creates chaos. Fewer farm workers mean fewer crops harvested. If crops aren't harvested, they can't be transported, stored, or sold. That impacts transportation companies, warehouse operations, and retail businesses. The same domino effect ripples through construction, childcare, hospitality, and countless other sectors. This isn't theoretical. In California, undocumented workers make up approximately 25% of all farm laborers and construction workers. Remove them from the equation, even temporarily through fear, and entire supply chains begin to break down. The historical precedent is clear and sobering. When Arizona adopted aggressive anti-immigrant laws in the early 2000s, an estimated 40% of undocumented residents left the state. The result, Arizona's economy suffered significantly, and unemployment for low-skilled white men actually increased rather than decreased. The lesson was unmistakable. Immigrant workers don't take jobs from Americans. They create economic activity that supports jobs for everyone. But these operations represent something even more troubling than economic disruption. The raid took place just days after a federal appeals court upheld a temporary restraining order that explicitly prohibited federal agents from conducting indiscriminate immigration raids based on racial profiling in Southern California counties, including Los Angeles.
Sweeps in Southern California, saying there was evidence that some arrests had been based on people's race or ethnicity, their mere presence in a location, their occupation, or the fact they were speaking Spanish or English with an accent.
It is hard for me to believe that raid was consistent with the court order.
Earlier today, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the administration's immigration operations.
Nobody's getting swept up. We're running targeted enforcement operations across the country.
As of late July, 46% of 57,000 detainees in ICE custody did not have any criminal record in the U.S., and many of those with convictions had immigration or traffic offenses on their records.
The July court order had banned arrests based on race, ethnicity, Spanish language use, or accents, requiring federal agents to produce warrants before making arrests. Critics argue these raids violate both the letter and spirit of that ruling. Los Angeles officials immediately recognized that Wednesday's operation looked exactly like the kind of racial profiling raids the courts had forbidden. Mayor Karen Bass questioned the federal government's claim that the immigrants targeted were gang members and demanded evidence. City officials said they are now considering all legal options, following what they described as a clear violation of federal court orders. The tactics themselves reveal the administration's approach:
Trojan Horse, that operation, we had pre-intelligence. We knew what was going on in that location, as we do in nearly every location that we come into contact with here in Los Angeles. We knew there was criminal activity afoot there for a long time. So we're not going to ignore criminal activity, we're going after it. And that's exactly what we did. It was a very creative and innovative concept that our Border Patrol agents came up with. That's that same creativity and innovation that we see along the border and in the interior every day that brings good, sound operations to make our city safer.
Federal agents used rental trucks to conduct raids, with one Border Patrol commander, Gregory Bovino, posting footage of the operation online like a promotional video, boasting that his team was on a mission and not leaving until we accomplish our goals. In defending these operations, officials claim they're conducting targeted enforcement based on pre-intelligence about criminal activity. They assert that locations like the Home Depot had been sites of criminal activity for a long time and couldn't be ignored. This isn't law enforcement, it's performance art designed to terrorize communities, and terrorize it has. The data shows that under the current administration, more than 70% of those detained in immigration raids have no criminal record at all. Many more have only minor traffic violations or other minor offenses. An investigation into one prior sweep revealed that out of 78 individuals detained, 77 had no prior record with ICE. Worse still, U.S. citizens are getting caught up in these dragnet operations. Americans like Andrea Velez and Adrian Martinez have been thrown to the ground, arrested on fabricated charges, and denied basic necessities. Velez, a soft-spoken Los Angeles resident heading to work, was forcibly pulled by masked men into an unmarked SUV. When she called out to a nearby LAPD officer for help, thinking she was being kidnapped, ICE agents charged her with assaulting a federal officer. The government later dropped the charges when it became clear they couldn't substantiate a crime that never occurred. The economic implications extend far beyond immediate job losses. Los Angeles is home to more than 10 million immigrants, comprising over a quarter of California's population and a third of prime working-age adults. These aren't people living on the margins of the economy, they're integral to its functioning. Immigrants in Los Angeles held $38.3 billion spending power in 2019 alone and paid $9.6 billion in federal taxes, plus $5 billion in state and local taxes. They make up 51.4% of the city's business owners and 71.7% of the essential services workforce. In Los Angeles County, foreign-born residents contributed $232.9 billion to the county's GDP, with immigrants accounting for more than half of all self-employed workers and generating $7.2 billion in business income. These numbers aren't abstractions, they represent the foundation of Los Angeles's economy. When you remove or terrorize this population, you're not just affecting individual families. You're dismantling the economic infrastructure of one of America's most important cities. The ripple effects are already visible beyond employment statistics. Each missing worker impacts a California business. Each empty shop reduces state and local tax receipts. The interconnected nature of modern economics means that immigration raids in Los Angeles affect supply chains, consumer spending, and business investment across the region and beyond. Some economists are now suggesting that California should quantify these economic damages and send the bill to the federal government. After all, the state and local governments played no role in triggering the economic disruption. That was entirely the result of federal immigration enforcement actions. The timing makes this particularly significant. Net immigration, which provides a steady supply of available workers in key fields, is way down this year. This will have long-term macroeconomic consequences that extend far beyond Los Angeles. Industries from agriculture to construction to hospitality depend on immigrant labor, and the current enforcement approach is creating labor shortages that can't easily be filled by native-born workers. The myth that American workers will simply step in to fill these jobs has been thoroughly debunked. Efforts to persuade U.S. citizens to work in agriculture, for example, have largely failed. The work is physically demanding, requires specific skills, and often involves conditions that most Americans won't accept. As one researcher who worked alongside Mexican farm workers noted, "I worked alongside Mexican workers, and I just gained so much respect for the strenuous nature of the job. They knew so much about what they were doing. Meanwhile, Los Angeles County Supervisor Hilda Salas has introduced a motion to study the economic impacts of recent immigration enforcement actions, particularly on small businesses. If approved, the motion would require monthly reports to the Board of Supervisors through December, documenting workforce losses, affected industries, and the economic impact of property damage and imposed curfews. The broader implications are staggering. If the current approach continues, we could see similar economic disruption spread to other major metropolitan areas with significant immigrant populations. Cities like New York, Miami, Houston, and San Francisco all depend heavily on immigrant labor and could face similar economic shocks. This isn't just about immigration policy, it's about economic reality. The American economy has evolved over decades to integrate immigrant workers into essential industries. You can't simply remove millions of people from the workforce without massive economic consequences. The data from Los Angeles proves this beyond any doubt. The question now is whether policymakers will acknowledge these economic realities or continue pursuing enforcement strategies that damage the very communities and economies they claim to protect. Los Angeles is providing a real-time case study in the true cost of aggressive immigration enforcement, and that cost is measured not just in human suffering, but in economic devastation that affects everyone. These operations may have lasted only a few hours, but their economic impact is still unfolding. As Los Angeles officials consider their legal options and businesses count their losses, one thing is clear. The intersection of immigrati on policy and economic reality has created a crisis that extends far beyond the individuals who were detained that August morning. The city's economy is the real casualty, and the full extent of the damage is only beginning to be understood. Thanks for watching. If you want to understand how immigration enforcement is affecting other major U.S. cities, check out our other videos. And if you want to stay updated on the economic impacts of immigration policy across America, be sure to subscribe for more in-depth analyses of the stories that are reshaping our economy.